All right, so to start today's work, I'd like you to multiply out each of these. We're multiplying products of binomials here, and in some cases, binomials by monomials as well. All right, and then to check in and make sure you're on the right track as you're working through these. For number 1, you should have gotten an answer of x squared minus x minus 12. Because remember, we multiply everything in the first parenthesis by everything in the second parenthesis, and then we combine the like terms. So we're combining that negative 4x and the positive 3x in the middle to get that negative 1x, which we just write as negative x. Now when you get to number 2, we're multiplying 3 things together. Now it doesn't actually matter which ones you multiply first, but you really have to choose first just 2 of them to multiply by. Now you could start by multiplying the 2 into the x minus 5, that would be fine. Or you could choose to multiply the 2 parentheses together. Either way will work. I don't care which way you do it. But I'll tell you right now, I'm going to go ahead and multiply the parentheses together first. Just because I think that's a little bit easier, because now multiplying in the 2 is even easier. But you can do it either way, you're going to end up with the same answer. Alright, and so then once we multiply the 2, remember the 2 distributes into every term, so it just doubles everything. Same kind of thing happens in number 3. And again, I'm going to choose to multiply the parentheses together first, mostly because I just find that a little bit quicker to do at the current point. But if you wanted to multiply the x into one of the sets of parentheses first, that would be fine. Notice it would only go into one set of parentheses though, not both. Alright, and then we can multiply the x, which is nice and easy because basically you're just adding one more x in every single term to get that final answer. Now today we're actually expanding some of the work that we've been doing before into being able to multiply out stuff that looks a little bit more complicated. So you notice here we're going to multiply a trinomial by a binomial. The principle behind it though is the same. We are still going to multiply everything in the first parentheses by everything in the second parentheses. It just means there's going to be a few more things to multiply here. And so when multiplying everything in the first by everything in the second, I'm going to start by multiplying the x squared by both of these terms. So when I do x squared times x, that gives me an x cubed. Then I take the x squared and I multiply it by the 5. So I'm multiplying the x squared by both of the other terms. Having done that, I now turn my attention to that minus 3x. So I do the minus 3x times x, and again the minus 3x times the 5. I'm being systematic about this. I'm going in the same order. That way I don't accidentally miss something. Alright, next up I got to deal with the 18. So I do the 18 times x, and I do the 18 times 5. Now once I've done this, I need to look to see what can be simplified. And yes, there are some like terms here. You'll notice that we have a couple x squareds, and we have a couple x's. I can go ahead and combine those. So for the x squareds, I'm going to do 5 minus 3. And for the x's, I'm going to do negative 15 plus 18. When you do that, you should get this as your final answer then. X cubed plus 2x squared plus 3x plus 90. And yes, I do want to give it looking like this. I want to give my answer in standard form, which is to say, I want to go from biggest exponents down to smallest, with everything being simplified as much as it'll go. Now we did that one so that we can then be able to do this one. This is basically what we need to be able to deal with by the end of class today. So we're multiplying 3 binomials together in this case. Write down the problem if you haven't yet. And just like in the warm-up where we're multiplying 3 things together, we're going to pick 2 and multiply those first. Now it doesn't matter which 2 you choose to multiply first, but I'm just going to go ahead and choose to multiply the first 2 together. And so we're going to start by multiplying the x minus 2 times the x minus 10. Now that's all familiar. We've been doing that style for a while. When we do that, we do the x times x, which gives me the x squared. X times the minus 10 gives me minus 10x. The minus 2 times x gives me minus 2x. And the minus 2 times minus 10 gives me a plus 20. And then I'm going to have to multiply this by the other set of parentheses. But to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and combine the like terms first. That way I don't have to multiply quite as many things together. And then, this problem looks a lot like the last problem, right? And so again, we're going to multiply everything in the first parenthesis by everything in the second parenthesis. When you've multiplied everything in the first parenthesis by everything in the second, this is what you should end up with. So check that, and then you combine your like terms. All right, and when we combine the like terms, this is where you should end up. We get a cubic as our answer. So x cubed minus 15x squared plus 56x minus 60. So for writing this one in standard form, you should be able to do the whole thing start to finish. Let's check that first step, make sure it's looking all right. So we multiply the first two parentheses together first. You didn't have to do the first two parentheses, but it tends to be what's most natural. And then, yes, I do like to combine the like terms before multiplying by that last set of parentheses. Once you get here, then go ahead and multiply everything in the first by everything in the second. And so then go ahead and multiply everything in the first parenthesis here by everything in the second parenthesis. And this is what you should get, and then we look for like terms that we can combine. And again, we got a couple x squared terms we can add together, and we have a couple x terms we can add together. When we do that combining, this is where you should end up as your final answer. Now, having done the previous problems, you actually have all the tools you need to do this one, just you haven't seen one that looked just like this before. Now the first thing to note here is that squared. Of course, that's what's different, right? Remember that squaring means multiplying something by itself. So if I'm going to do this problem, I'm actually going to have to do this x minus 2 squared. Now please remember, exponents do not distribute. So I cannot just turn this into like x squared minus 4. It doesn't work that way. Instead, I have to write that out as x minus 2 times x minus 2. And then that's still times the x plus 5 times x plus 3. So how do we do this? Well, again, you pick 2 and multiply. Now you could do this a couple different ways. You could go ahead and multiply these two together, and then take that result, and you could then take that result and multiply it by the x plus 5, and then take that result and multiply it by the x plus 3. But that's more difficult than it really has to be. Now, it's still not super simple, but a little bit easier. Go ahead and multiply the first two together and the last two together. So multiply the x minus 2's and multiply the x plus 5 times the x plus 3. So go ahead and just multiply those two sets together, and then we'll see what that gives us as a result. And so when we multiply those together, this is what you should be looking at after you've multiplied and simplified. So the x minus 2 times x minus 2 gives me x squared minus 4x plus 4. And then when I multiply the x plus 5 by the x plus 3, I get x squared plus 8x plus 15. Now once I do this, then I can go ahead and worry about multiplying those results together. But notice that since I had 4 different things to multiply at the first, just picking 2 pairs, it tends to be a little bit simpler. But again, if you wanted to, you could have multiplied the x minus 2's together first to get this, then multiplied that by the x plus 5, and then multiplied that result by the x plus 3. That would also be okay. I just find this a little bit easier. Alright, so now that we're at this point, we're going to go ahead and still multiply this out the same way, which is to multiply everything in the first parenthesis by everything in the second parenthesis. It just means there's going to be a little bit more to multiply yet again. You're going to be multiplying all 3 of these by all 3 of these, so when you do that, expect to get 9 terms out. Alright, now it's time to check and see how that multiplication went. Since I'm multiplying 3 things by 3 things, yes, that means I'm going to end up with a total of 9 terms here. Check each of those. And then we're going to have to worry about combining like terms from there. But check to make sure you're correct at that point first. So as I look at that long list of numbers, I am basically looking for any like terms that might have come up. The x to the fourth, there's no other x to the fourth. X cubed, I do have multiple x cubed, so I have this 8x cubed here, got that x cubed, so I can combine those two. Then I look for x squareds, and yes, I have multiple x squared, so I'll be able to combine that term, and that term, and that term. And then finally, we look for any x's that I can combine, and yes, we do have multiple x's that we can combine. So each of those, I'll end up combining those like terms. The 60, there's nothing like it, that's why it's just going to stay at 60. When you do that work, this is the final answer you should come up with.